Unfortunately, I'm gonna be driving
All good.
to pick up my son from a tennis tournament. So I am not gonna be on I'm not gonna be on video, but I'm here and grateful that we can record it in case I need to break off to deal with a tournament.
Of course. Yes. All good. All good. And now I'm the host, so now I'm the boss.
You're the boss.
You gave me the bus.
Gave you the
Yes.
magic. There may be a few more people that come on. I think we had about like 13 people altogether. So
Mhm.
Let's give a couple of minutes, right?
yeah.
Should we give a
Yeah.
couple of minutes? Okay. Gonna put
But
some
Johanna's confused on the time, so there's one.
I think that there's a question about when it's happening on the chat.
Yeah, I see that. Now having now. Thanks, Sess. Yeah, and I think there are a few people like Maria Jose or something. They're gonna watch the recording. So
but you still
and
think
then
that
uh, Amber's partner John was going to come. He's registered.
let's just give a few minutes, right?
Yeah. Xenia is coming. I think once Johanna and Xenia get here, that's and John, he comes. That's it.
Great. So what's the topic, Mike? Am I poking to your shadow?
Which one? I'm a shadow that's become so dense that I've congealed into human form.
Great. Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Johanna said she's going to watch the replay.
All right. Well, we could slowly begin then. Right? Or is there someone else? Yeah, mute it.
Somebody may
Perfect.
pop in, so we'll allow space for that, but I think we should start.
Sounds good.
So let's just begin with a very slow orientation inwardly. And observe every sound. Become aware how the different sounds are entering your being, affecting you. And become aware now of the sense of feeling. Can you feel the wind? And can you feel the place upon where you sit? Where gravity makes you meet another physical sensation. Every time your attention goes to own thoughts, just point it back to the feeling. Yes. And now become aware of your smelling. Don't try to force it, but just become aware of what appears to you. What touches this sense? How does it feel? How does it feel? And now become aware of your tasting. Well, is there something to taste? Yes. And you can taste your own spit. You can taste. But you can also taste life. To just open the awareness to taste life. Mm. And just notice if there is resistance. Don't do anything with it. Just notice it. Is there any resistance towards tasting life? Ah. Become aware how you see, how you actually see, even though you have your eyes closed. There is something here you see. Notice the sense now, the seeing, the incredible, beautiful place that can both taste life and wanting to resist life. if you can stay concentrated here, there's a certain form of clarity that gets invited in. Can you rest inside of this place? Or are you leaving it? Yes. Let this be the invitation for your own inward journey. Allow this space inside of you to be where the knowledge and the clarity upon the next time we have here together to rest. In this space inside that calls in the light, calls in consciousness. And with that intention, focus on your breath, the natural rhythm of your breathing. How you get touched by life each moment with this natural rhythm. It's just happening. And when you're ready, open your eyes and meet me here. And don't let the mind go astray and somewhere else. Stay with what feels, with what arises inside of you during this little moment. Did you recall resistance in some ways? Regardless if you were aware of it or not, there is resistance. Something wants to resist life. Something wants to resist clarity. Because something wants to resist the movement into the unknown, the place where consciousness expands inside of you. There is a place inside that lives through all patterns. And the place inside that lives through these old patterns is very much alive. And what is alive here is in some way having its own intelligence, playing around in its own little drama, but does not want to be seen. And that has been given a very fancy name, which we call shadow. Because something wants to roam in the dark. Something wants to roam in the unconscious. But I'm not here to talk about shadow from merely a very psychological place, even though that's the title. Thanks, Mike. I'm here to try to build a bridge between what you can read in the books and the theory of psychology about, unconscious patterns, but trying to bring it into a more spiritual point of view with what's actually arising and what's alive inside. What roams inside is somehow both you and not you. It is you because it is part of the lower self, we could call it. It is part of your being that has not been recognized yet by itself. I will use the metaphor of light here as consciousness, right? So when light hits a mirror, it reflects back, but something can still be on the other side of that mirror, something that roams in the unconscious. And the parts of the lower self that doesn't want to be seen can put a certain form of mirror towards that light, so it can stay in the hidden. For understanding what I mean, it is important to remember that a human being, you exist and consist of multiple layers. You're not just the physical, yet you are the physical here. You can touch, you can feel, you can listen, you can see. Even though we became so modern today that we can look through a screen and still be together. Still freaks me out a little bit how that works. But somehow it still works. But we're still physical. At the same time, we're only physical because you have energy. You are energy that manifests into physical. And we call that the etheric, the place that doesn't grow old in time. It's still very much alive. And your being also consists of a body which I choose to call the astral body, where all feelings and sensations arises, which arises because of the idea of man, the I, the place of where mental thought, the pure thought, arises. The pure thought of the idea of life arises, that goes into the astral sensation, feelings, great feelings, goes into your energy and becomes physical, where the physical is that which is bound by time, right? It might be the only thing we're certain about, that we grow old and we grow out of this body one day. So when we talk about shadows, and why I say we cannot only talk about it from a psychological place, is because the shadows doesn't only belong to the physical. Shadows belong to the world of etheric and astral, the places that is not only bound to this one incarnation, if you at least believe in many incarnations. If you believe that you are more than this physical, you might also believe in incarnations, but that will be another talk. We don't have to spend the time on that for now. But the shadows here is something that, as I see it, remember, what I share here is not theory I've read in the book. It's lived experience that has come into recognition of more than just this one incarnation. What roams in the unconscious belongs to more than just this physical. For your thought, even though they are somehow activated by the brain, doesn't belong to the brain. What you sit with here in this incarnation is a manifestation of things you have done in the past, actions you have taken, steps you have chosen, that have led you into this incredible moment where you sit with both the terrible and the beautiful, which we call life. And every time that you have chosen a step to the unconscious, where you haven't been fully conscious about your choice, you also grow the life that lives in the unconscious, that stays in the hidden, behind that mirror that reflects the light back so it will not be seen. But even though it will not be seen, it is very much alive, right? And it still lives through you as patterns. Patterns that arises from instinctual drives, surviving, which we as humans have developed through millennia. Surviving, choosing oneself more over the group, over the collective, feeding the part inside of the lower self that believe in the separation, that believes that the individual is more important than the collective. It arises from inherited tendencies, from Yeah, what you inherit from your legacy, your family, and so on and so on. Yet, it doesn't belong to the family, it still belongs to you. If you again believe in past lives. Because then what you have to understand then is that when you incarnate into this moment, what is chosen as inherited tendencies comes from the choices you have taken before, finding the right box or frame to allow the karmic patterns to arise, which allow the shadow to arise from your surroundings, your culture, giving form into this physical moment of this incarnation. So what I'm trying to share here is that you could point towards the shadow as something that arises from instinctual drives, survival, the feeling of surviving, inherited tendencies, and karmic patterns. But what is it that is arising? Just take a moment to just sit with that question. What is it that is arising? And what is it that actually want to control our patterns, our choices? A full answer cannot be found. And that's not the intention here either. But the intention with that question is to point towards that there is an intelligence that roams within. I don't say this to freak you out, right? Don't be freaked out. It's part of the natural way that we live. And it's incredibly beautiful when we can see it from a consciously place. At some point, everything will be touched by light. In other words, everything will become conscious. There can be no doubt in that. That's the movement, inevitable. But yet that which needs to be touched by light will feel overwhelmed. That's how it is. Gaze upon the sun and your eyes will feel overwhelmed. Everything feels overwhelmed by the light. And when we use the term shadow, which has become very popular in today's world of self-development, it is important to understand this one phrase, that the purpose is not to destroy the shadows, but to transform it through consciousness. Let's take it again. The purpose is not to destroy the shadow, but transform it through consciousness. But something inside still wants to escape also the uncomfortable feelings, right? The uncomfortable moments. Something judges even when the shadow or the unconscious patterns are in dominance. The shadow itself playing with itself. It wants to destroy because nothing can be destroyed. But what stays hidden inside of the unconscious has an intelligence, if you at least get to explore that through that inquiry. And that intelligence can play tricks. And that can be frustrating and yet incredibly beautiful when you start to see the mechanics of how the mind works. Because the mind is not limited to this physical either, right? Something inside of the mind gets activated through different kind of incarnations again. The choices you have taken, the steps you have chosen. But something controls it. What remains unconscious governs us. What becomes conscious can be transformed. Try to take a moment to recall a recent moment where you reacted emotionally, or where you judged someone, or where you felt envy, irritation, or pride, etc., etc. Where you reacted in a certain way, where you could judge, or where you felt unconscious about your reaction. Find a moment. Now try to explore. Was there any thought that appeared first? Any thought regarding someone or regarding yourself? See if you cannot judge it. Just become curious. Was there any feeling that appeared after the thought? And out of that feeling, was there any patterns that appeared? Well, do I have to do anything about it? No, just observe it. Don't go into the doing. See, this little exercise is observing the inner life. Because inside of you, you have the entire universe of your soul. Your soul that have had incredible experiences, that have developed its own way to sense and filter life. And your inner universe also contains those shadows. And the little practice here is to witnessing thought and reactions. The personal thought that appeared due to a certain circumstance that gave a rise to a certain form of feeling. That gives birth to the pattern. And I say gives birth because no patterns exist forever. Each time you choose to react in an unconscious way, you give birth to it once again. For an unconscious pattern doesn't exist in the moment, in the present, doesn't exist there. But something inside of your personality, something inside of your energy body that remembers the past, gives birth to something from the past, and takes you away from the present moment. Therefore, you give birth to it every time. I'm not saying that to shame or blame. Remember that. This is incredible beautiful. Because each time you can just witness it without judging it. That's what the shadow wants, judging it. Each time you can just see it for what it is and bring consciousness. You create a little crack in that mirror that the shadow holds up to not be seen. You give a little crack into the realm or to the inner world of the unconscious that is terrified of the light because it yet doesn't know that the light is that which brings salvation, liberation, peace. It's incredible, beautiful. But seen from the personality, seen from that place that feels like you are the one that carries the burden of the entire world, and every time you do something bad, you're a bad person. The shadow stays inside of its own loop. But from the perspective of the soul, it opens the eyes of curiosity towards the journey of realizing itself, of waking inside of this physical. For the unconscious, the shadows that exist in the astral and the etheric goes with you into the physical, and becomes present through the reactions by your past. What is the purpose? To see the shadows as patterns and not identity. Sounds easy, but every time you get affected by what you do in the unconscious, don't you identify with it? Or at least identify with the actions or what you feel like you have caused. Identification, poof, right there. Such a strong force, and it just takes over. And you get completely absorbed and immersed into that belief that limits you from seeing the bigger picture that you are not just this. You are not just this individual, but you belong to something that is both eternal in the mystery of what we call the present moment. That you are more than just this little moment. That incredible force that identify takes a blink of an eye less, and you get out of yourself. Like that. Something leaves you and identify with that which you're not. But that which you have caused and created due to the steps and actions you have taken in the past. When I say that, to give a little more clarity upon what I mean with it, or something more tangible, I will still speak from the place of believing in past lives. But when you look upon a soul that is not bound to time, taking different forms into incarnations, having an experience of a physical body, many actions can be taken, many choices are taken, many people are hurt in one incarnation, many people are hurt in many incarnations. See, already there. There's a reason why I said that. Something inside can feel, did I hurt someone? Well, I don't want to hurt someone, right? But you can only hurt someone if it's their shadow that is present. If someone stays fully inside of themselves and not identifying with the past, not identifying with that which they are not, they will not be hurt by your choices. And that's how the shadows feed by each other. Because the mirror that reflects upon the light is that which also projects towards another, right? And as long as we project away from each other, instead of looking inwardly into the inner life and the soul and the universe inside of one's own soul, we keep projecting, and somehow we feed the distance between one heart and another heart that somehow is in coherence with each other in the present. Does this make sense, or is it a little too far out? Just a little check in here. Okay. Else you have to like too much. Have to bring a little back. We'll do that. But I'm trying to keep myself here a little bit. And in that moment when you feel that you are doing something towards another or someone is doing something to you, it creates that feeling, right? And the practice to come back into the place where you don't try to destroy the shadow but transform it through consciousness is the place where you use your mind as as the place for consciousness to penetrate and pass through that which doesn't want to see the light. To find the clarity upon the pattern, not the identity. Because a feeling, when that arises, is old. Feelings inside of us is old, is very old. And they somehow, all feelings can be traced back to something older than your story. We have had a long time where inner child work has been popular for good reason. Good reason. It makes us come into the first moments of feelings as, this incarnation. But often, that in itself is not fully satisfying, because the story of this incarnation cannot find the entire understanding of a feeling. Feelings are older, because feelings is not something that belong to you, but it passes through you, through the astral body of your being, that doesn't just belong to this time. I think it's good we have this on recording so it can be listened to more times. And when those feelings arises, coming back to talk about past incarnations, something inside of the unconscious wants to feed its own selfishness. Coming back to the instincts, the survival instincts, wants to feed itself. Me before you. Me before you. Taking selfish actions. Taking egoic actions. But that which takes the egoic actions doesn't exist in the reality of consciousness. It exists in the lower dimension, what I choose to call unconsciousness. Every time an action that is egoic has been taken due to, taking care of yourself, or you have to survive, or you have to protect yourself from a place of that is not aligned with your heart and with your thought and your being, you feed this double that's been created, right? Because what happens is, when you take an action because you think that it is the best for you, and you distance from yourself, from the center of your own being, due to the past, as I mentioned before, something inside of the unconscious creates a kind of double of you, but a double that only exists inside of the unconscious, that only exists through the laws that is created by you, the laws that makes you survive. And in the modern days, maybe more than the modern days, but the last period of spirituality, we have called this the ego. But the ego doesn't exist in the conscious. I choose to call it the double, because you have your own ego, you have your own double, and that has been created by all the actions that has not been aligned with your inner universe, with your soul, with your being, and with your purpose. And every time you feed it, you feed the double, and you allow the reality that the double lives in to become more real inside of this reality. Yet, the reality of that which is existing has a limitation because it doesn't want to see the light, right? It wants to hold the mirror as a reflection so the light can reflect back. It wants to hold the mirror for that purpose, yet it just wants to project. Don't see me. I'm not here. That's the place where all the shadows are roaming from. And it creates the stories that lives in our mind, that we're so desperately trying to figure out. Creating the personal identity, creating the beliefs, creating the limitations. And with beliefs can very easily create separation. But that which wants to project, if that is the one creating beliefs, it will always just protect, and it will never meet inside of coherence of that place that the meditation in the beginning was trying to invite you to. That space where resistance and the taste of life are both present, because that is where we are as humans. We are right now in between the two worlds of consciousness and unconsciousness. We are the bridge. And that is the incredible, beautiful opportunity and blessing that we have. But the shadow says, no, it's too much. That's the way it feeds itself. Yes. So what I'm trying to bring with this is, again, the idea that if you're trying to figure it all out, you will only be lost in the abyss of the unconscious. Not everything is meant to be figured out. But what moves through you requires your attention. It requires your awareness. Not to figure it out, but try to become aware how easily, even though in this little practice, that when you went from the thought that appeared in the moment to the feeling, into seeing the pattern, how easily something can say, what should I do about this? How can I get out of this? Resisting. Right there. How can I get out of it? Something is resisting. Because the shadows are intertwined and they are playing with each other like a spider web. Right? You touch it one place, it can be felt in the other, and everything starts to shake. And that this is what we see in this time we are in right now as humanity. A place where the light is moving through the cracks in that mirror. The light is penetrating into the unconscious, and the entire spider web is just standing and shaking, saying, not me, not now, too much. I cannot do this. Right? Something says, I cannot do this. But the feelings we meet, we are meant to learn to mature with it. We are meant to learn to hold space for it. For the feelings are old, and the feelings is not just yours. The feelings is not the reason for the shadow. But if the feeling feels too much and you believe in the shadow saying, I cannot do this, this is too much, you step away from yourself. So when I mentioned earlier that what remains unconscious is governs us, and what becomes conscious can be transformed. Can be transformed. Already there, I could sense that someone says, well, how can I transform it? Already there trying to figure it out. And in that moment, something is trying to figure out. Something moves away again. Because the shadow does that. The natural rhythm of it. We're not here to destroy it. We're here to bring consciousness into it. And bring a consciousness into it means that we find a place where it can arise, where it can roam. It's always a journey home. Because when that spider web shakes, your being shakes. And when you react through that, and react towards, the old patterns, you step away from yourself. And when you then identify with that which has stepped away, you'll feel the same again and again. And then you will become more and more angry, frustrated, trying to figure it out. And the more you start to judge it, the more you want to destroy it, right? The impatience. But everything shakes right now, inside of our being, as we also see in the outer world. Everything shakes because we have to learn to hold space for that which arises within. What happens when you do that? Transformation happens, and that is that which brings clarity. True clarity, where you don't try to figure something out from your own personal story, but where clarity arises like blessing, where clarity arises like grace. Every time you feel like, every time you have that story, I cannot do this, this is too much. Great. You're right there. Because you meet it, right? You meet that shadow. Oh, there you are. All right. Catch yourself. Okay. There it is. No more story. Finding, holding, moving with it. Because that's what it is. It's a dance. But the shadows doesn't want to dance. It wants to play with you like a puppet. But a pure mind and a pure heart is dancing with it. For nothing can be resisted. Resistance happens out of fear. And that fear is old, and older than your story. Therefore, what I'm trying to invite in here is to understand that this is an incredible threshold for spiritual transformation. If you have done the mental work, if you have done all these things, great. Nothing is wasted. Remember that. Nothing is wasted. But if you can find a place to see in a self-observation, let me correct that, through an honest self-observation that doesn't get entangled by personal ideas, you'll penetrate some of the veils that the shadow wants to make you see through, because that's what they do. The intelligence of them creates veils between you and truth, between you and reality. And every time you find that place to do that honest self-observation, you become aware. You become aware of the patterns that leads to the double. And being able to find a place to just be with that is where the spiritual transformation happens. Because you will learn by nature to recognize it without judging it. Something that feels almost impossible is so close when you just, adjust it a little bit. It's so close. If you can put that personal desire for understanding away and listen to this guidance, something gets recognized when the shadow is seen without judging. When that recognition appears, another certain form of responsibility arises. Not as responsibility of, not as a burden of guilt and shame and blame, but a responsibility to see how all shadows are intertwined. When you touch the spider web somewhere on yours, and it affects others' shadows within you, you start to see that there's only one spider web that affects all of us. Right? That responsibility. For the other responsibility of blame, shame, guilt, and so on, belongs to the past, belongs to that which still identifies with the actions and the choices that have been made in the past, which is not real anymore, but becomes real by the identity that you believe in this moment, that gives birth to it in this present, that makes you feel distant to the present moment. Something there needs to justify itself then. When it cannot find a place inside of your being to just be held and to move. For when the feelings inside has a place to move, it's like a fruit maturing on a tree. It needs the time until it's ready to be harvested. And with harvesting, I don't mean someone taking it. I mean that the apple falls to the ground and becomes nutrition to the very tree that once gave birth to it again, in a new form. Purification. Recognition that happens when the shadow can be seen without justifying for itself. Creates a responsibility in understanding how it influences behaviors, not just in you, but the collective. One web. A place where guilt and shame and blame doesn't exist. For what is left is the soul's curiosity, the soul's exploration. And with that responsibility, what comes is clarification. A clarification that can create a new inner image of how you want to show up in life, how you want to act. For example, let's say you find let's say you envy someone and you feel stuck in that in the feeling of envying someone. You know, the feeling can take over, right? Can be hard to just fully letting go of it. Maybe you feel like, oh, okay, I dropped it for today. Then tomorrow it's there again, and you're like, no, my goodness, it's there again. You feel completely possessed. The feelings are old, but they take form in you. But with that, with the steps I gave here, what once got perceived in your being as being envy, the same energy can be alchemized towards appreciation, a shift, an alchemization in your being of a feeling. But for you to make that alchemization, you still need to find that space for the feeling to stay. Because if you want to destroy or get rid of the feeling, you don't allow the alchemization to have its time, to allow the fruit to blossom until it one day will fall to the ground and create nourishment for the tree again. Yeah, just take a moment to take that in. And think about how incredible it is that, for example, the words that I share here creates different feelings in each one of you. How you project my words, how you receive them. If it will all be the same, why would there need to be so many of us? Then there would only have to be one. But for some reason, there is a higher intelligence that wants different experiences. And all of these experiences are holy. For you that sits here, it feels terrible and it can feel like hell, but that experience is actually whole in itself because it gives that experience which the higher intelligence that some call spirit, some call God, gets through you. Without your unique blend, without your unique cocktails of the shadows and how you perceive it and how you show up to life, your experience will not happen. And that will not be something that the divine could then mature from and could reflect and be could be that which gave expansion to consciousness, because that's what's happening. Through the hindrances you meet, there is always an invitation to expansion of consciousness. That could not happen without the shadows. The shadows is incredible holy. For what you will find with these steps, with this kind of knowledge, if you ask me, is that the clarity I mentioned is that there is a light inside of the shadow. Each shadow has a light, an incredible light. And if we want to destroy the shadow, if we want to resist it, we step away from that light. What happens when we step away from the light? We lose ourselves. Because we are the light. We step out of ourselves once again and feed the very thing that we judge also. Shadow playing with shadow playing with shadow until we get so fed up with it that we just come back to the same again. I cannot do this anymore. You see? Incredible dance. But you have the choice with the awareness to either choose the double to be the puppet master, but just allow all the puppets to dance, or you become the artist, the master inside of that dance with it all, that chooses the steps. I feel for giving some time for questions, but I'm not fully done yet. Let's hope we have time for both. How long do we have, Mike? 2 hours?
Yes, that was the time. 2 hours.
All right, great. Perfect. So,
In the no time.
in the no time. I think I've heard that before somewhere. So, even though I said that you are not meant to figure it out, when I say it that way, what I mean is you are not meant to figure it out from your personal story. Because what belongs to the past will most likely just roam in that unconsciousness. But something can still find that clarity. And if you want to be as honest with yourself as possible and show up to truth, show up to being the best version of yourself, which at the end, all of us want. When we don't see that, it's because we are projecting and we live through a shadow. Because at the end, all of us actually wants to be the best version of ourselves. Even though that can be hard to see in the light in the world sometimes. It must be the truth. At least that's what I believe in. And I will not be tempted to move away from that. With that work, there is still a certain form of practice that can help. Very simple. If you have worked with me before, you know that I like simple practices that can take you very deep. We don't want to overcomplicate things. So, let's create a practice. That practice will have a certain form of structured inner exercise for allowing you to see more of the universe within your own soul. So at night, take 5 minutes to just review your day backwards. Observe where you acted automatically. In other words, where you acted unconsciously. Where the shadows appeared. But without self-judgment. If self-judgment comes, give it a place, right? It's still a feeling. The entire practice that I gave for the shadow. When self-judgment comes, let it move through you. Let it alchemize, but don't cling to the identity of it. So review the day backwards and observe where you acted automatically, unconsciously. What can help for the structure is to choose one trait that you want to work with. Let's say you begin Monday morning and say, all right, now I want to work with impatience. Then for that week, you might observe where you acted through impatience. towards yourself or towards another. That kind of structure can help if you cannot really find traits without one specific, right? Sometimes you can sit and like, okay, what did I do? Well, I cannot find anything. And then you can feel confused because the shadows doesn't want to be seen, right? So using the mind with that kind of observation to say, this week I will work with impatience or something else. Then for that week, when you see the places where you acted through these automatic movements within, you work with its opposite quality. So when there is impatience, you allow it to be felt. You don't want to destroy it. You don't want to move it away. But you could become curious about its opposite to attentive listening, for example. Okay, I don't want to, I'm impatient. I don't want to listen. Then there's a place that wants to listen behind the place that doesn't want to listen, that hides us impatience. Let's move on that surface. We don't want to go in there because we don't want to bring the light in. So in the review of the day, and you find in this example impatience, you can just become curious upon how it would feel to just invite in to become attentive in that moment, to listen, to sit and listen, give space, and see how the feeling from that impatience is still alive. See, you're not trying to figure out why was I impatient. Was it something here from my childhood here? Was it here? Was it here? No, just the quality of becoming attentive. You allow that to arise. It is not needed. So if you cannot figure it out, don't worry about it. What is needed is to just be with that feeling. Because when you are with a feeling from that place of not identifying with the shadow, but simply being there with it in that natural state, your being finds home. How long it takes? Who knows? Depends. That's also where a shadow of impatience can be met, yes. But at the end, finding a space to that feeling will always make your being find home. And if you realized how many times during a day you step out of yourself, you understand what I mean. Small thoughts that can very quickly get you out of the sender. Great, you're out of the sender. Beautiful opportunities to find home. Because every time you're out of the sender, you bring something back home. Incredible, beautiful, even though it feels terrible. There can be no space for judgment. Only if you exist in the double reality of those patterns. So the practice here is not necessary, but it can be a help towards alchemization. But the beautiful thing is the alchemization happens. You don't need you don't need that practice for it to happen. Because if you can allow the feeling to arise in you, grace takes care of the rest. But this can help. And it is always recommended to be explorative, to be curious, right? Because that's what the soul is. The soul is just like a curious child that wants to taste life. It wants to taste all of life with that great vitality as you see as a kid. Tireless. Complete tireless. And when you can pinpoint towards it with that kind of observation and clarity, you open up for that kind of developmental force that which I call grace, but that force which realize that the shadow is not the enemy. The shadow is happening due to your karma and the environments that takes over your mind's perception and put it into a box. But the developmental force is that which shows and helps where consciousness must grow or where consciousness is expanding. And where the I, the self, the soul, has not yet taken hold in such a way that it cannot be shaken by the web that shakes under the surface. Therefore, you find the place where you shake. There is so much to be said about this. I'm trying to give an introduction that will still make your mind tired and allow something else to arise within that. We have 20 minutes left. I feel. Can I speak a little bit more before questions? I wanna go a little bit into the shadow work culture we see today, to see if we can find some places to criticize it a little bit, just for fun. See where it takes us. When I shared that there is a space for feeling, there is a difference between finding a space for a feeling that can also be expressed and some of the new modern approaches that can encourage you to embrace or express their shadow. For some impulses should not be strengthened. Yet you see that in many modern approaches to this work. You strengthen it by breath work or plant medicine or other ways where, you really feel like I'm awakening this. But if you don't know what you're awakening, you might strengthen something that is actually holding to a reality inside of the unconscious, the double. It requires discernment. It requires attentive listening to feel the difference. But often when something wants to be expressed from this maniac place, something wants to be strengthened. And that which wants to be strengthened is actually that which wants to hide itself. Even though you feel like, oh, now I'm finding it, I'm embracing it. No, you're embracing the surface of something that doesn't want to be seen. And this is something to be cautious with if you go into the shadow work. And the same way as some impulses should not be strengthened, not every inner impulse deserves expression. Because your attention is precious. Because you sit here as an incarnation for the divine to express and realize itself. Through that, that happens through what you bring your attention to, because that is what creates your reality. And even though you can never make a mistake, you can still catch yourself in some traps of the past if you give expression to some impulses that just want you to stay in the unconscious. Because often what wants expression is something that wants validation. And even though as a human being, we sometimes need validation to feel safe, not taking that away, that which wants validation is often that which blocks for transformation. So the step of seeing the shadows as a psychological acceptance to accept the being that you are and accept the incredible mind that you have, because your mind is incredible and it has capacities that you haven't fully realized yet. It's the bridge for the higher worlds. Unlimited force, unlimited magic. But the psychological acceptance will only stay as that limitation unless it becomes a moral development through your being, through the heart, through this that we have talked about. So how would that look? Let's say that the inner impulse that wants to be expressed as, I own my jealousy. I own it. It's okay. Everything is okay. And you find a place to really feel that jealousy. You can feel it, but you don't have to identify with it, right? That's the difference. But recognizing it clearly and then work through what we have talked about as a transformation is the difference between strengthening the impulse and working in a way of transforming it into the spiritual development, the spiritual transformation. Because if you just use that kind of work to strengthen the impulses, to strengthening and nourishing the unconsciousness, you are just feeding the ego that now has a name before it, saying the spiritualized ego. Right? You allow the double, the ego, to become spiritual. And then things become way more complex. Right? Because you open for that, the inner universes of the soul. You open for all the justifications that the ego can find in there to create a new identity. Nothing wrong with it. And often there's a journey that has to go through it. But recognizing the journey again make you not feel trapped in it, but seeing it as part of the path. Right? As you walk a pilgrimage, you will go through different kind of weather. You will go through different kind of environments. One of those places might just be a spiritualized ego, but you have to recognize it to see what it is, to not feel trapped in it, and then identify with it. That might require a new crisis for you to collapse to see what you were trapped in. A spiritualized ego is that which wants to own every impulse. Right? Where the ego can simply just change the costume and feeling like I'm awakened now and I see what others don't. But remember, if your awakening lifts you above others, it is not God or the divine you are meeting. For true spiritual development produces humility. So, what begins as a psychological acceptance has to move into the disciplined thinking, the ethical self development, a spiritual perception of the difference between the conscious and the unconscious, the incredible opportunity you have to be that bridge, to be that center, and to see the movements and the dances between both until it emerges. For without these three, disciplined thinking, ethical self development, and spiritual perception, the shadow work can become self analysis without the real change. And let's stop calling it shadow work. I don't like the word work too much. It feels like something you have to do. But you don't even need to listen to this, what I share, because what I share is actually just the natural development or the natural movement that is already happening. You don't have to do anything. Coming back to what I shared in the beginning, the light is inevitable. But with the knowledge, you can bring light to see the movement and that can help you. But it's still happening. The fear of feeling like you are missing out, the feeling of fearing that you are failing, might be the very thing that make you go into the traps. For when you become too trapped in wanting to change, you can become obsessed with yourself. And when I say yourself, it's that which identify with the double, that which roams in the unconscious, constantly analyzing your traumas, your wounds, the patterns, and your inner narratives. This can just trap you inside of that abyss of the unconscious. So that which actually gives a true development, when that has been recognized and seen, the sign for that is when you can start to see that something in you starts to turn outwardly towards service and responsibility, not just for you, but for others. That is the sign that the shadow begins the alchemization. Okay. Now we have a little time for questions. Let's see, there's some in the chat. So continuing recognition dissolves shadows. Yes.
Yeah. So what I meant by that is every time a shadow appears that I recognize in that moment is the start of dissolving the shadow. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But dissolving here means that it becomes conscious. It becomes alchemized. The intelligence doesn't dissolve, right? The intelligence inside of the shadow just become aware and become more conscious, and will actually serve a greater purpose that serves consciousness, that serves light. It just doesn't know it yet. Think about maybe a time in the past where you believed something and you felt, well, that's the right thing to do. Suddenly you realize, my goodness, that was just me trying to survive. It actually it didn't feel right. Right? It's the same. The intelligence, like the shadow, reacts through the limitation of what is conscious within that intelligence. Right? So when the light enters that shadow, it feels overwhelmed. But the intelligence within that shadow become more conscious and will therefore serve a greater purpose through you, because it will invoke the talents of your soul that you have also worked in the past to come into this moment, if that makes sense in some ways. The shadows interact within the web. Yes, all the strings they play. One big symphony.
And not only within my
No.
part of the web, but the whole web with everyone in it. So
Yes.
could you say that a lot of the misunderstandings we have in the world are everyone's shadow kind of interacting with the other's shadow?
Yes, but for understanding how that works, we need more time and we need to go into more depth. I'm really trying to keep it as surface as I can here, but we need to go into more depth to understand how that works. But that's how it is, yes. And the more simple way to explain it is the shadows is that which project, right? The mirror, it projects the light. The shadow one does the same. So the shadow always projects towards another instead of going into introspection, right? So the movement when you catch you're projecting, that's the time for introspection, if that makes sense. All right, Mike, you have raised a hand like you always do. The physical. Great.
Sorry. So if I'm impatient, and that's a shadow, my impatience is a shadow, and if I'm not talking about Indira in this case. But if I'm impatient because of a question that's been asked, because something that you said may be like a time release capsule of wisdom that takes time for me to feel my way into that. And so if my impatience is really masking that I actually want to listen to and but my listening becomes personalized. Like I want to listen to my own dialogue, like you just said, in my own head, so I can kind of get an understanding of what it is that you just said. Is that also shadow? Or was that way too confusing for everybody?
If you get triggered by something, there's a shadow. Yes. But when you start to recognize the shadow and you start to become conscious of it, you also start to get in touch with the more pure emotions that will guide you somewhere. For that, we need to talk more about telepathy to understand how that works, right? The cosmic instincts instead of the survival instincts, where the shadows is that which work in survival instincts, and the cosmic instincts is that which actually leads you somewhere, that runs through your emotions to feel like, well, this is just not something for me, right? Because we are all unique expressions of the divine, which means that we all have our different paths, our different journeys to move left or right, which means that, of course, no one has the same kind of way to be touched by words or to be touched by a song, or and someone stays longer inside of what gets touched by words, for example, than others, where something for others needs to move more quickly. Doesn't mean that one is more right than another, but can be two different parts of the path. But if you stay with that pure emotion, you will not lose what touches you by others speaking. You can allow the others to speak because nothing gets projected towards them. You just stay in your pure emotion, and something just like feels more outside, so you can hold space for that and still allow that to be touched. But when you project, you got taken out of it. You got taken out of yourself, and that's where you lose the touchness. Has nothing to do with the other. So that's a projection, if that makes sense.
It does.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Jamie, you have raised a hand.
Yeah, can you just expand a little more on what you were talking about breath work, how that can enforce a shadow? Is it because you're doing something to get something?
All right, so let's say that you have spent 30 years of breath work and you have worked on the same daddy issue. You're trying to figure it out. But every time you come into feeling the same, that which you feel might just be a personal feeling that wants to stay inside of feeding itself. You don't come into a movement that brings you somewhere, right? So if the impulse actually just wants to, it's like, these feelings they're so addictive. Personal feelings are so addictive that you can get a high in your own way by going into, for example, breath work to feel the same issue or feel the same wound, even though it might feel like, oh, well, this was intense and this was too much, and something in you can feel addictive to it. That which feels addictive is the inner impulses that wants to stay unconscious. But it might feel like you are working on something. When I say this, I'm not trash talking breath work in general, right? It depends upon how you use it. At the same time, you might also just sit with the same daddy issue for 30 years because there is something that still needs to move. So I'm not saying that it's always wrong, but I'm pointing towards an inner discernment within you to feel like, am I feeding something that just wants to stay in the unconscious? Or am I actually alchemizing something to change the quality, right? Because, for example, impatience is a quality that wants to stay in the unconscious. Inner listening wants to bring light or consciousness into it. Does that make sense? So, in the breath work, for example, you can do the same practice and see what appears, the practice I gave here earlier, and see how it moves. Because maybe that which feels like breathwork is helping you starts to change by how you use your mind. Does that make sense? Was that an answer to the question? Beautiful. Great. Thank you. I see we are over time, but is there a question more? Indira, please unmute yourself and speak.
How about part 2?
Part 2 of this? Oh, I didn't see that question. Well, I can always talk. I love talking, so I'll let that be up to Mike.
Maybe our dear Mike can arrange something for a part 2.
Of course. I love talking, so let's that be up to Mike and see how much the shadows are triggered by putting things together, if you feel for it.
I'm open to anything. My hope with this group was to kind of introduce Lucas to other people and continue to do the work ourselves. So if there's a way to do that, that it wouldn't be a barrier to new people coming in, um, I'm open to any ideas about that. But I also would very much like to go deeper into shadow, because I feel like we've really just scratched the surface today of my shadows, at least anyway.
You scratch the surface,
Yeah.
but the more you allow the integration to happen, the deeper this goes.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. It's happening.
It's happening. It's moving.
It's happening.
Yes.
But for those like, Beth and Jen who haven't had the chance to listen to you a whole lot, it may be a different experience for them. So
Yes. Well,
yeah, that's how we manage that.
of course. We allow this integration to happen and see where it moves from here. Thank you, Indira. All right. Let's take a moment here to let's take 1 minute to just land in this together. All right. Thank you all. Let's see here. I'll make you host again, Mike.
Thank you, Lucas.